we call it the dollar supremacy debate. Sometimes it goes by like dollar hegemony, dollar dominance, dollar primacy, even. So Fareed Zakaria, CNN host of that the fucking only foreign policy show there is. It's not good, but it's the only one. So he said he did a segment on dollar supremacy, and he said, "quote If the U.S. dollar's global supremacy erodes, America will face a reckoning like none before." And he was saying that in response to a Russian announcement that the Chinese yuan would be the currency that Russia uses to backstop its international currency exchanges. And if countries that the U.S. sanctions can do global transactions that don't involve the U.S. dollar or U.S. banking intermediary institutions, then they can avoid sanctions, basically, or at least the bite of sanctions. And America's power to unilaterally punish, it depends on the US dollar being the world's reserve currency. And so we refer to that as dollar supremacy or dollar hegemony. And Fareed's freaking out about a China-Russia alliance to undermine dollar supremacy. That's the whole shtick of the segment, right? But Fareed's kind of fucked up here. People like Michael Pettis and others, people who know both political economy and China, are like, Fareed doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, right? So there's a few things going on, or to know, or maybe this is my hot take, I don't know. But one, the search for alternatives to the US dollar as a reserve currency has been going on since the global financial crisis, right? Over a decade. And it's not just Saudi Arabia. It's not just Iran. It's not just Russia. It's not just China. It's not just Brazil. It's also the EU, right? So the trend is toward a future where there's no dollar supremacy. And there's nothing imminent in terms of like immediate change, but dollar supremacy is not permanent, and it is eroding. It is being actively contested, right? Two, Fareed Zakaria sees this debate about dollar supremacy picking up steam right now because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And like, that's part of the story, but it ignores the global damage that's been done by the fact of dollar supremacy, including damage to American workers and global workers. Dollar supremacy is good for Wall Street. It makes Wall Street strong, but it does so at the expense of U.S. export sectors and commodity producers, right? Three, the big way in which Fareed is completely just wrong is that he says losing dollar dominance is a threat. This is the thing that like most people were reacting to most virulently. It's not a threat, right? In a lot of ways, it would be a gift. The power to unilaterally punish is not something that has served our interests very often in the past. And the reason states are looking to diversify away from the US dollar in the first place is entirely because we've over weaponized our own currency. And so if the world's reserve currency was a basket of currencies instead of just ours, we could still sanction bad guys, but we would have to do it multilaterally as a collective.
No.
What the, like, that's how fucking horrible would that be? Encasing US power within arrangements that check US power is exactly what the US needs. Does it want it? Obviously not. Does it need it? Obviously yes, right? So, in the left, this has been debated since like 2016, 2018. This is not something that the left agrees on, because there's an obvious argument about bridling America's overuse of sanctions, right? Nicholas Mulder's got this book that I cannot remember the name of it. Oh, The Economic Weapon, something like that. But in the book, he reminds us, as a historical fact, sanctions are not usually an alternative to war. They're a step on the path to war, or they're war by other means, right? And even when we use sanctions without going to war, we hurt a lot of innocent people with them. Like, the body count is astounding on this fucking tool, But there are also progressives who see the potential to use dollar supremacy to build a progressive global economic order, like go after oligarchs and kleptocrats, green sanctions for polluters, social dumping tariffs, right? If you have slave labor in your supply chains, that kind of stuff is how you start to make a social democratic economic order. And I raise all this because I actually don't necessarily know what the right answer is, but I do know that Fareed's answer is wrong. And so Fareed is known as a corporate liberal, right? His idea of what foreign policy should be is always to ask, like, what would Wall Street want, right? And because of that, he has no intention of leveraging dollar supremacy to forge a progressive global order. And my thing is, like, if you can't get behind progressive uses of US power, then what's US power for? I mean, like, the point of dollar supremacy would just be to hurt others without being checked by anybody, right? Like, might makes right, exceptionalism. That's not the way.
It's
So that's
like
all.
John's dream.
Yes. If John Bolton wants it, you have to like go through a mental process of being like, wait a minute, and check yourself. And then
Immediately check
it
yourself.
doesn't it doesn't mean that like you have to like counter polarize yourself to John Bolton, but at least like revisit, you know. What would John Bolton do needs to be like a mantra.
Well, I think sanctions are just also such a tool that people think it's like a magic wand. You like apply a sanction and behavior is going to change. And Peter Beinart wrote in the Atlantic, I think like years ago at this point, but he did this like academic study essentially of just like reviewing the literature on the use of sanctions and their impacts in terms of achieving their
Purpose,
policy
yeah.
goals. And what he found was that in most cases, and what the data says, right, from all of this research, is that applying sanctions, particularly blanket sanctions, actually feeds corruption and authoritarianism, right? Which again has these second order effects on the society that you're trying to impact in some way. And I think, you know, I don't know what the answer is either, but I like can sympathize with other countries who are looking for other currencies that might be more stable, particularly when our economy in the US is basically like a casino for Wall Street
Yeah.
because at least the US government has decided it's not really going to regulate it. I mean, there's someone at the SAC right now who is going after, crypto and various entities, right? But that's one person isn't going to change the entire power structure there. And ultimately Wall Street's endless profits are not in the interest of the people producing the labor at the end of the day, right? Or at least right now, I think perhaps it could be, right? There's a whole lot of laws like Glass-Steagall and Dodd-Frank that like used to put up some parameters that like protected the economy from Wall Street's volatility, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like so many policymakers are like, 2008 wasn't a thing. What are you talking about? That was just when Obama was elected.
Yeah. Just because it's good for the financial sector in the US does not mean it's good for America or Americans or in the national interest. Like that's class war by other means when you start assuming that, you know.